Hello grade 11. Today we will continue section 21.3. This is part 2, the ecology of protists. Please make sure to open your books on page 612 and follow along. The objective of this video is to determine how protists obtain food. In the previous part of this section, the previous video, we discussed autotrophic protists. Today we will be discussing heterotrophic protists. What are heterotrophic protists? They are protists that obtain food from other living organisms. Some heterotrophic protists, they engulf and digest their food, while others live by absorbing molecules from the environment. Amoebas are a kind of heterotrophic protists. They capture and digest their food, first by surrounding the cell or particle, and then by taking it inside themselves to form a food vacuole, as you can see in the following figure. A food vacuole is a small cavity in the cytoplasm that temporarily stores food. Once inside the cell, the material is digested rapidly and the nutrients are passed to other organelles inside the cell in order for them to make energy. Another kind of heterotrophic protists are ciliates. Paramecium is a kind of ciliate that uses their cilia, which is the hairy substances on the outer surface, to sweep food particles into the gullet, which is an indentation in one side of the organism. Please look at the figure and spot the gullet. The particles are trapped in the gullet and are then forced into the food vacuoles. The food vacuole then pinches off or squeezes itself into the cytoplasm and eventually fuses with lysosomes, which contain digestive enzymes. Waste materials are emptied into the environment through an anal pore at the cell membrane. We discussed amoebas and ciliates. Now it's time to discuss slime molds. Slime molds thrive on decaying organic matter. They are found in places that are damp, for example, on the floor of a forest or in a backyard inside a compost pile. Composts are remains of organic matter, like vegetable peelings, fruit waste, and grass cutting. Slime molds play a very important key in recycling nutrients in an ecosystem. So, at one stage in their life cycle, slime molds they exist as a collection of individual amoeba-like cells. That means they look like amoeba. However, eventually they aggregate or they combine to form a large structure known as plasmodium, which may continue to move. The plasmodium eventually it develops sporangia. Now these sporangia are structures that are charged in making and storing spores. Usually spores are in the haploid state. That means they contain half the number of the DNA. These spores, they aid organisms to reproduce and form new organisms. Let's move on to protists that absorb. Some protists, they survive by absorbing molecules that other organisms have released to the environment. For example, water moles are considered as protists that absorb. They grow on dead and decaying plants and animals. They absorb nutrients through their cell walls and cell membranes. If you have seen white fuzz growing on the surface of a dead fish in the water, you've seen water moles in action. Thank you everyone for your attention. This is the end of part 2, section 21.3.